American Frontier, 1870. The scream tore through the desert twilight, piercing the stillness that had settled over the vast emptiness of the Arizona Territory. Akila froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife at his waist. The Apache warrior had been tracking a wounded deer for the better part of the afternoon, but this sound, this was no animal's cry. It came again, higher this time, filled with the unmistakable timbre of human suffering. A woman's voice. Akila hesitated. The boundaries between his people's lands and the settlers' territories had grown increasingly blurred and dangerous. Venturing into white settlements meant risking not just his freedom, but his life. The soldiers from Fort Wilcox had been particularly merciless these past months, hunting Apache with a fervor that spoke of something beyond duty. Yet the scream came again, and something in its raw desperation stirred him. Soundlessly, he moved toward its source, a small cabin nestled against the base of a rocky hill. Smoke curled from its chimney despite the unseasonable heat. As he drew closer, he could see that the cabin stood alone. No barn, no neighboring houses, just a small garden plot withering under the relentless sun and a lonely well. The door was ajar. Another cry emanated from within, followed by a low moan that spoke of a pain beyond endurance. Akila stood at the threshold listening. No other voices, no sounds of men or horses, just that terrible rhythmic moaning that had replaced the screams. "Hello?" he called, his English accented but clear. "I come to help." Silence fell abruptly, then, "Who's there?" The voice was weak, breathless with fear and pain. "James, is that you?" Akila pushed the door open further. The cabin's interior was dim, lit only by the dying embers in the fireplace and a single oil lamp on a rough-hewn table. On a bed in the corner lay a young woman, her face ghastly pale against the dark tangle of her hair. Her nightdress was soaked with sweat, and her hands clutched desperately at her swollen belly. "Not James," Akila said simply, remaining in the doorway. "I heard cries." The woman's eyes widened with fear, then confusion, then a flicker of desperate hope as she took in his appearance, the deerskin clothing, the long hair bound back with a leather strap, the knife at his belt. "You're Apache?" she managed, her breath coming in short gasps. Akila nodded once. "I am Akila of the Chiricahua." Another contraction seized her, and she cried out, her back arching against the bed. When it passed, she looked at him with eyes swimming in tears. "My husband went for the doctor 3 weeks ago. He never—" She couldn't finish as pain overtook her again. Understanding dawned on Akila. This woman was alone, in labor, abandoned in one of the most unforgiving landscapes known to man. Her husband had either met with misfortune or had simply left her to her fate. He should leave. This was not his concern. The white settlers brought their own troubles upon themselves, venturing into lands they didn't understand with arrogance and fear in equal measure. But as he watched, a tear slipped from the corner of her eye and traced a path down her temple into her hair. "What is your name?" he asked, stepping fully into the cabin. "Olivia," she whispered. "Olivia Mason." "To Olivia Mason," he repeated, his voice gentle as he approached the bed. "I will help you bring your child into this world." Relief and fear warred in her expression. "Why would you help me?" Akila didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved about the cabin with efficient purpose, gathering clean cloths, bringing water from the well, and stoking the fire to heat it. "Because," he finally said, as he returned to her bedside, "no one should face the night of their greatest battle alone." The hours that followed were long and brutal. Akila had assisted with births in his tribe before. His older sister was a midwife, but this was different. Olivia's labor progressed poorly, her strength already depleted from weeks of solitude and worry. Throughout the night, he cooled her brow with wet cloths, held her hands as she pushed, and spoke encouragements in a mixture of English and Apache that she couldn't understand, but seemed to draw comfort from nonetheless. Dawn was breaking when the baby finally came, a tiny boy silent and still in Akila's hands. "My baby," Olivia whispered, her voice hoarse from hours of crying and exertion. "Why isn't he crying?" Akila tried everything he knew. He cleared the child's mouth, rubbed his back, even breathed gently into his tiny lungs. But the boy had come too early, too small, and perhaps had been fighting too long, even before his difficult birth. "I am sorry." Akila said, wrapping the infant in a clean cloth. "He has gone to walk with the ancestors." Olivia's scream then was different from any that had come before, not of physical pain, but of a soul being torn apart. She reached for her son with trembling arms, and Akila placed the small bundle gently against her chest. She clutched him close, her body racked with sobs that seemed to come from some deep, primal place beyond conscious grief. Akila stood back, giving her this moment that belonged only to her and her lost child. He had seen death many times, had lost his own wife and daughter to the white man's diseases 2 winters past. He knew there were no words, especially from a stranger, that could reach into such darkness. Eventually her sobs quieted, though tears continued to stream down her face. "What happens now?" she asked without looking at him, her eyes fixed on her baby's peaceful face. "Now you rest," Akila said. "You have lost much blood. I will make food, then help you bury your son when you are ready. And then you'll leave," she stated, not a question. Akila paused. "Yes," he said finally, "then I will leave." But as dawn gave way to morning and morning to afternoon, as he prepared a simple stew from the meager supplies in her pantry and dug a small grave beneath a juniper tree on the hill behind the cabin, as he stood beside her while she said goodbye to the child who had never drawn breath, something changed. When evening came, Olivia collapsed into an exhausted sleep and Akila sat outside the cabin door, watching the stars emerge. He should return to his people. They were camped less than a day's ride away, waiting for him to return with news from his scouting expedition. Chief Naiche would be expecting his report on the soldiers' movements, yet he found himself unable to leave. The woman inside was still weak, her color poor, her body ravaged by the difficult birth. She had no food stores to speak of, no strength to draw water, and from what he could see, no neighbors for miles. To leave her now would be to condemn her to death, as surely as if he had slit her throat. The thought of his own wife, Kiona, and their daughter, Meli, came to him. They had died alone while he was away hunting, with no one to comfort them or ease their passing. He had returned to find them already wrapped for burial, their faces forever hidden from him. No, he would not leave Olivia Mason to die. Not tonight, at least. When she woke the next morning, she found him splitting wood outside the cabin, his copper skin glistening with sweat in the early light. "You're still here," she said from the doorway, her voice faint with lingering weakness. Akila set down the axe and wiped his brow. "You need help." "Why? Why would you care if I live or die?" He regarded her steadily. "I have my reasons." "What do you want from me?" Fear edged into her voice. "Nothing," he replied, "but I offer a trade. I will hunt, chop wood, protect this place until you are strong. In return, I ask only for shelter." Suspicion clouded her face. "A trade? An Apache warrior needs shelter from a white woman." Akila's expression revealed nothing. "We all need something." For a long moment, Olivia studied him, this man who had delivered her dead child and then buried him with more gentleness than she would have expected from the savages her husband had so often railed against. "1 week," she finally said. "You can stay 1 week." Akila nodded once, then turned back to his work, the rhythmic thud of the axe filling the silence between them. Neither of them knew then that 1 week would stretch into 2, then a month, and that in the space between them, in the silence of the frontier and the shared grief they both carried, something impossible was about to take root. As days melded into weeks, the arrangement between Olivia and Akila settled into an unexpected rhythm. Each morning, Akila would be gone before dawn, returning with rabbits or quail for their meals. He repaired the sagging porch, reinforced the walls of the cabin against the coming winter, and cleared the overgrown garden plot that Olivia had abandoned when her pregnancy had made the work too difficult. For her part, Olivia slowly regained her strength. The fever that had threatened in the days after her son's birth receded, and color returned to her cheeks. She cooked the game Akila brought, washed clothes in the stream behind the cabin, and tentatively replanted the garden with seeds she had been saving. They spoke little at first. Their conversations were practical, limited to the necessities of their shared existence. "Water barrel is low," Akila might say. "I'll fill it tomorrow," Olivia would reply. Or, "Storm coming. Need to secure the livestock. I'll help." But as days passed, Olivia found herself watching him from the corner of her eye as he worked. His movements were efficient, powerful, with a grace that reminded her of the mountain lions that sometimes prowled the hills. When he thought she wasn't looking, she caught glimpses of a different man, one who paused to watch a hawk soar overhead, or who once, after a rainstorm, stood with his face turned up to the rainbow that arched across the eastern sky, something like wonder softening his stoic features. One evening, as they sat on opposite sides of the fireplace, Olivia broke their customary silence. "Why did you really stay?" Akila looked up from the arrowhead he was fashioning. "I told you. You needed help. There must be others who need you more, your people. My people know I am scouting. They expect me to be gone for some time. But why here? Why me?" She hesitated, then asked the question that had troubled her since that first night. "Is it because you want something from me?" His dark eyes met hers, and for a moment, something flashed in their depth that she couldn't interpret. "If I wanted to harm you, Olivia Mason, I would have done so already." "That's not what I meant," she said, her cheeks flushing. Akila returned to his work, his fingers deftly shaping the stone. "I stay because I choose to." "That's not an answer," she persisted. He was quiet for so long that she thought he wouldn't respond. "Then, I had a wife, Kiona, and a daughter, Melly. The white man's sickness took them 2 winters ago while I was hunting." Olivia's breath caught. "I'm sorry. When I returned, they were already gone, wrapped for burial." His voice remained even, but his hands had stilled. No one should die alone, Olivia Mason. The simple truth of his statement hung in the air between them. Olivia looked down at her own hands, remembering the terror of those weeks alone, the certainty that she would die in childbirth with no one to even mark her passing. "James left me," she said suddenly. "My husband. He didn't go for a doctor. We had argued about moving west. I wanted to return to Boston after the baby was born. He said this was our home now, that I needed to stop complaining and accept our life here." She took a shuddering breath. "The next morning he was gone, took most of our money and the good horse." She hadn't intended to share so much, but the words had spilled out unbidden. Shame heated her face. What must this man think of her, abandoned by her own husband? But when she dared to look at Akila, there was no judgment in his face, only a quiet understanding that somehow hurt worse than condemnation would have. "The man who would leave his wife alone with child does not deserve the name of husband," he said simply. Something broke loose in Olivia's chest at his words, some tight, painful knot of self-blame that had been growing since James's departure. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come," she whispered. Akila set aside his work and moved to kneel beside her chair. Tentatively, as if approaching a wounded animal, he reached out and took her hand in his. His palm was calloused but warm, enveloping her smaller hand completely. "But I did come," he said, "and now you are not alone." In that moment, as their eyes met over their clasped hands, something shifted between them. Something neither was ready to name, but both felt with sudden, startling clarity. Akila withdrew his hand first, returning to his place by the fire. The rest of the evening passed in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now, not the awkward quiet of strangers forced together, but something more comfortable, like the hush that falls over the desert just before the stars emerge. That night, lying in her bed, Olivia found herself remembering the warmth of Akila's hand on hers, the steadiness of his gaze, and the way the firelight had played across the planes of his face. She told herself it was gratitude she felt, nothing more. After all, what could exist between a Boston-born preacher's daughter and an Apache warrior? Outside her window, the moon rose over the silent landscape, casting silver light over the cabin, where 2 people from different worlds slept under the same roof, each beginning to orbit the other in ways neither had anticipated. As the weeks progressed, their interactions grew more comfortable. Olivia learned that Akila enjoyed the wild berries that grew along the stream and began to include them in the cornbread she baked. Akila noticed that Olivia struggled to reach the highest shelves in the cabin and, without comment, built a small stepping stool that appeared beside the pantry one morning. They began to share stories in the evenings, Olivia speaking of her childhood in Boston, of her father's church and her mother's garden, of the books she had loved, and the future she had imagined for herself. Akila told her of Apache ways, of the beauty of their ceremonies, of his training as a warrior, and of the growing troubles between his people and the encroaching settlers. "My father was Chief Naiche's closest advisor," he explained one evening. "He taught me that understanding your enemy is as important as knowing how to fight him." "Is that what I am?" Olivia asked quietly. "Your enemy?" Akila's gaze was steady. "What do you think?" She considered his question carefully. I don't know what we are to each other, but enemy doesn't seem right." A rare half-smile crossed his face. "No, it doesn't." As autumn deepened, bringing cooler nights and a crisp clarity to the desert air, their daily routines became more intertwined. They worked the garden together, harvesting the vegetables Olivia had planted. Akila taught her to set snares for rabbits, while she showed him how to make bread that didn't sit like a stone in the stomach. One afternoon, as they worked side by side pulling carrots from the garden, their hands brushed in the soil, Olivia felt a jolt of awareness travel up her arm, and when she glanced up, she found Akila watching her, his dark eyes intent. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Your hair," he said, lifting a hand toward the loose strands that had escaped her bun. "In the sunlight it shines like a raven's wing." The simple compliment sent heat rushing to her face. No one had ever remarked on her hair before. James had always insisted she keep it tightly bound, calling it common and ordinary. Before she could respond, the sound of approaching horses broke the moment. Akila was on his feet instantly, his posture alert. "Inside," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Now." "But who—" "Army patrol, go." Olivia scrambled to her feet, wiping her hands on her apron as she hurried to the cabin. Through the window she watched as 3 soldiers rode into view, their blue uniforms unmistakable against the dusty landscape. Akila had positioned himself between the cabin and the approaching men, his stance casual, but his hand resting near the knife at his belt. "Afternoon," the lead soldier called as they drew closer. His gaze took in the cabin, the garden, and finally Akila, narrowing with suspicion. "This Mason's place?" "It is the home of Mrs. Olivia Mason," Akila replied, his English careful and deliberate. The soldier's eyebrows rose. "And what exactly are you doing here, Injun?" "I work for Mrs. Mason." The soldier exchanged glances with his companions, a smirk playing at his lips. "That right? She paying you, or is there some other arrangement?" The implication in his tone made Olivia's stomach turn. She pushed open the door and stepped onto the porch. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. The soldier's attention shifted to her. The leader touched his hat. "Ma'am, Sergeant Gregory Holt, Fort Wilcox, just patrolling the area. Heard there was a white woman living out here alone." "As you can see, Sergeant, I'm not alone. Mr. Akila works for me." "Akila, is it?" Holt's gaze returned to the Apache. "Funny, we've been looking for a brave by that name. Raided a supply wagon last month. Killed 2 men." "That is a lie," Akila said, his voice level but with an edge that made the horses shift nervously. "You calling me a liar, boy?" Holt's hand moved to his pistol. "Sergeant," Olivia interjected quickly, "there must be some mistake. Mr. Akila has been here with me for over a month. He couldn't have been involved in any raid." Holt studied her, skepticism plain on his weathered face. "Your husband know you're employing an Apache, ma'am?" Olivia lifted her chin. "My husband is dead, Sergeant. I make my own decisions now." It was a lie, but one that felt necessary in that moment. A widow was afforded certain liberties that an abandoned wife was not. Holt's expression shifted, something like sympathy briefly replacing his suspicion. "Sorry to hear that, ma'am. These are dangerous times to be out here alone. Which is precisely why I'm grateful for Mr. Akila's assistance." A tense silence followed. Holt seemed to be weighing his options, his gaze moving between Olivia on the porch and Akila standing stoically in the yard. "Well," he finally said, "we'll be continuing our patrol. Fort's keeping a close eye on this area. Had reports of Apache war parties moving through." He fixed Akila with a hard stare. "You see anything suspicious? You let us know." "Of course, Sergeant," Olivia replied, her heart pounding. "Safe travels." With a last suspicious glance, Holt wheeled his horse around. His companions followed suit, and soon the 3 were disappearing into the distance, dust rising in their wake. As soon as they were out of sight, Olivia sagged against the porch railing. "Are you all right?" she asked, looking at Akila. He nodded once. "You lied for me." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes. Why? The question was simple, but the answer felt anything but. Why had she lied? To protect him, certainly. But there was more to it, a loyalty she hadn't realized she felt until that moment, a desire to keep him safe that went beyond mere gratitude. Because, she said finally, no one should face the night of their greatest battle alone. His own words returned to him. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight parting of lips, as if he might speak. But instead he crossed to where she stood and with infinite gentleness tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Thank you," he said simply. And in those two words, Olivia heard everything he wasn't saying. That night, as they sat before the fire, the earlier tension between them had transformed into something else. A hyper-awareness of each other's presence, a careful attention to the space between them that seemed at once too great and too small. "They will come back," Akila said, breaking the silence. "Holt did not believe you," Olivia nodded. "I know. It is not safe for you, my being here. It's not safe for me to be alone either," she countered. Akila studied the flames, his profile sharp against the firelight. "I should return to my people. They will be wondering why I have not come back." The thought of him leaving sent a spike of panic through Olivia's chest. "Is that what you want?" He turned to face her fully then. "What I want—" He paused, searching for words. "What I want has not mattered for a long time." "It matters to me," Olivia said softly. Their eyes held across the small space between them, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. A recognition of feelings that had been growing steadily, like the plants in Olivia's garden, taking root without either of them fully acknowledging their presence. "Olivia," Akila began, his voice lower than usual, almost rough. But whatever he had been about to say was interrupted by a sound outside, the distant whinny of a horse, followed by a curse. Akila was on his feet instantly, motioning for Olivia to stay quiet. He moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. "Someone is coming," he whispered. "One rider." Olivia joined him at the window, her heart hammering. Through the gloom, she could make out a figure stumbling toward the cabin, leading a limping horse. "James," she breathed, recognizing the silhouette of the man she had married 3 years ago. Akila's body tensed beside her. "Your husband." The moment between them shattered, reality intruding with all its complications. James was alive. James was here. And everything had changed. James Mason staggered through the cabin door, his once handsome face haggard and dirty, his clothes torn and stained. The sharp odor of whiskey accompanied him, along with the unmistakable metallic tang of blood. "Liv," he slurred, squinting against the firelight. "Knew you'd be waiting." Olivia stood frozen, her mind struggling to reconcile the man before her with the husband who had abandoned her months ago. "James, you're hurt." He waved a dismissive hand, then seemed to notice Akila for the first time. His bloodshot eyes widened, and his hand dropped to his belt, where a revolver was holstered. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, fumbling for his gun. "You let a damn savage in our house." Akila remained still, his expression impassive, but Olivia could sense the coiled tension in his body, a predator assessing a threat. "James, stop," she said firmly, stepping between the two men. "Mr. Akila has been helping me since you left. He saved my life." James's face contorted with anger. "Saved your life? From what?" "From dying alone in childbirth," she replied, the words cutting through the tension in the room like a knife. "Our son was born a month ago. He didn't survive." The news seemed to penetrate James's alcohol-fogged brain slowly. His hand dropped from his gun, and something like shock flickered across his face. "A son?" he repeated, his voice suddenly smaller. "We had a son." "Yes," Olivia said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You weren't here. Mr. Akila was." James swayed on his feet, and for a moment Olivia thought he might weep, but then his expression hardened again, and he jabbed a finger toward Akila. "Don't care what he did, he's not staying under my roof another minute. Get out!" "James," Olivia protested, "you don't understand." "I understand just fine," he snarled, his momentary vulnerability vanishing. "My wife's been playing house with a redskin while I've been fighting for my life. Well, I'm back now, and this is my home." Akila had not moved or spoken throughout the exchange. Now he looked to Olivia, a silent question in his eyes. She felt torn in two. Part of her wanted to order James out, to tell him he'd forfeited any right to call this place his home when he'd abandoned her. But another part, the practical part that understood just how precarious her situation was, knew that legally James was right. The cabin, the land, even the clothes on her back, belonged to him under the law. "Akila," she said softly, "perhaps it would be best if you went to the barn for tonight. We can talk in the morning." Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment, perhaps, or resignation. He nodded once, then gathered his few possessions, a small deerskin pouch, his bow and quiver, and the knife he always wore at his belt. "Be careful, Olivia Mason," he said quietly as he passed her. The words held a warning she understood all too well. As soon as the door closed behind him, James rounded on her. "Olivia Mason, that's what he calls you? Just how close did you two get while I was gone?" "Close enough for him to bury our child," she replied, a new steadiness in her voice. "Close enough for him to make sure I didn't follow our son to the grave." James flinched as if she'd struck him. He dropped heavily into a chair, the anger seeming to drain out of him. "I didn't know you were with child when I left. Would it have made a difference?" He didn't answer, instead rubbing a hand over his face. For the first time, Olivia noticed the dark stain spreading across his shirt sleeve. "You're bleeding," she said. James glanced down as if surprised. "Got in a bit of trouble in Tucson. Some men didn't appreciate my luck at cards." "So that's where you've been? Gambling?" He shrugged. "Among other things." "For 2 months? While I was here alone, pregnant with your child?" A flash of defensive anger crossed his face. "You wanted to go back east. Said you hated it here, that I'd brought you to hell's doorstep. What was I supposed to do?" "Stay," Olivia said simply. "You were supposed to stay." A heavy silence fell between them, weighted with all that had happened in his absence. Finally, Olivia sighed and moved to fetch her sewing kit and some clean cloths. "Let me see your arm," she said. As she tended to his wound, a deep knife slash that would likely leave a scar, she tried to sort through the tumult of her emotions. This was James, the man she had married in her father's church with such hope and optimism, the man who had promised to cherish and protect her, the man who had abandoned her to die alone in the wilderness. And then there was Akila, a stranger who had become, what, a friend? Something more? In the weeks they had shared this small cabin, he had shown her more care and respect than James had in their entire marriage. "That Apache," James said suddenly, breaking into her thoughts. "How long's he been staying here?" "Since the baby was born," Olivia replied, tying off the bandage. "In the cabin? With you?" The implication in his tone was clear. Anger flared in Olivia's chest. "Yes, James, in the cabin. Where else would he stay with winter coming on? But if you're asking what I think you're asking, then no, it wasn't like that." James studied her face, seeming to search for the truth in her eyes. "You care for him," he said finally. It wasn't a question. Olivia looked away. "He was kind to me when I needed kindness. And I wasn't." "No, you weren't." Another silence fell, this one heavier than the last. Outside, the wind had picked up, whistling around the eaves of the cabin and rattling the shutters. "I came back for you, Liv," James said at last, his voice softening. "I know I did wrong, leaving like I did, but I've changed. Got plans. Big ones." "What kind of plans?" Olivia asked warily. James leaned forward, a spark of excitement in his bloodshot eyes. "Gold, Liv. There's a strike north of here, just over the mountains. Not many know about it yet, but I got a map from a fella who was in the original party. We could be rich." Olivia stared at him, incredulous. "Gold? That's why you came back? To drag me on another wild adventure that will likely end in disappointment or worse?" His face fell. "Not just that. I missed you, Liv. Thought about you every day. But not enough to come back until you needed something." James had the grace to look ashamed. "I was scared, all right. Scared I'd failed you. Again. Knew you'd be furious with me for leaving." "I was furious," Olivia said. "Then I was terrified. Then I was in labor with no one to help me but a stranger. And then I was burying our son." Her voice broke on the last words. James reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "What was his name?" he asked quietly. "I named him William, after my father." William, James repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. I'm sorry, Liv. So damn sorry. His remorse seemed genuine, and Olivia felt her resolve wavering. This was the James she had fallen in love with, vulnerable, sincere, his rough edges softened. It's late, she said, rising from her chair. We're both tired. We can talk more tomorrow. James nodded, relief evident in his expression. I can sleep here by the fire, don't want to impose. The offer surprised her. The old James would have assumed his place in their bed without question. Maybe he had changed. All right, she agreed. There are extra blankets in the chest. As she prepared for bed, Olivia found her thoughts turning to Akila, alone in the cold barn. The wind had grown stronger, and she could hear it rattling the loose boards of the barn roof. Would he be warm enough? Should she risk bringing him a blanket? Before she could decide, James's voice came from the other room. Liv, what happened to all the money? She froze. What money? The money I left in the tin behind the flour sack. Emergency money. Olivia's heart sank. Of course. He hadn't come back for her at all. He'd come back for the money. I used it, she said, stepping back into the main room. For supplies. To survive. James's face darkened. All of it? There was nearly $40 there. Yes, all of it, she lied. In truth, she had barely touched the money, saving it in case she needed to flee west, but something told her that admitting that would be dangerous. James cursed, kicking at the chair leg. How am I supposed to stake a claim with no money? Perhaps you should have thought of that before gambling away whatever you took with you, Olivia replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. He looked up sharply. Don't you take that tone with me. I'm still your husband. Are you? Because husbands don't abandon their wives, James. They don't leave them to die alone. He was on his feet in an instant, crossing the room in 2 strides to grab her arm. I came back, didn't I? That's more than most men would do. His grip was painful, his breath hot with whiskey. Olivia felt fear snake through her, but she refused to show it. Let go of me, she said, her voice low but firm. For a moment she thought he might strike her. Then abruptly he released her, turning away with a frustrated growl. Get some sleep, he muttered. We'll figure things out tomorrow. Olivia retreated to the bedroom, her heart pounding. As she lay in the darkness, listening to James moving restlessly in the other room, her thoughts returned to Akila. The contrast between the 2 men couldn't have been starker, one who had stayed when he had every reason to leave, and one who had left when every vow bound him to stay. Sleep was long in coming, and when it did, her dreams were troubled. Morning brought a temporary peace. James was subdued, perhaps nursing both his wounded arm and a hangover. He sat at the table while Olivia prepared a simple breakfast, his eyes following her movements with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Where's the Indian? He asked finally. His name is Akila, Olivia replied, setting a plate of cornbread before him. And I imagine he's still in the barn, James grunted. He needs to move on, can't have him hanging around now that I'm back. Olivia bit back a retort. Arguing with James when he was in this mood would only make things worse. Instead, she turned to the stove, using the mundane task of cooking to hide the turmoil of her thoughts. A sudden commotion outside drew their attention, the sound of horses, multiple riders approaching at speed. James was on his feet instantly, reaching for his gun. Stay inside, he ordered, moving to the window. Olivia followed anyway, peering around his shoulder. What she saw made her blood run cold. Sergeant Holt had returned, but this time he wasn't alone. 6 soldiers rode with him, and they had surrounded the barn. No, she whispered, a sick feeling settling in her stomach. Before James could stop her, she was out the door, running across the yard toward the gathered soldiers. Sergeant Holt, she called. What is the meaning of this? Holt turned in his saddle, his expression grim. Step back, Mrs. Mason. We're here for the Apache. 2 soldiers had dismounted and were approaching the barn, rifles ready. A 3rd soldier stood by with shackles dangling from his hand. On what charges? Olivia demanded, planting herself between Holt and the barn. Raiding, murder, and now suspected desertion from his tribe, Holt replied. Got word this morning that Chief Naiche has been asking about a missing warrior named Akila. Seems he never returned from a scouting mission. Interesting coincidence, wouldn't you say? Olivia's mind raced. He works for me. I told you that yesterday. And I didn't believe it yesterday, Holt retorted. Makes even less sense now that your husband's returned. He nodded toward James, who had followed Olivia outside and now stood uncertainly in the yard, his gun lowered. Before Olivia could respond, the barn door opened. Akila emerged, his hands raised slightly to show he carried no weapons, though Olivia knew he would have hidden his knife somewhere accessible. "I will go with you," he said calmly. "No need for violence." "No!" Olivia moved toward him, but James caught her arm. "Don't be a fool," he hissed in her ear. "You want them to take you too, as his accomplice?" Akila's eyes met Olivia's across the yard. In them she read a silent message. "Stay safe. Don't fight this." "What will happen to him?" she asked Holt, her voice shaking despite her efforts to remain calm. Holt shrugged. "He'll be questioned at the fort. If he's innocent, he'll be released to the reservation." The lie was transparent in his eyes. The soldiers moved in, roughly grabbing Akila's arms and securing the shackles around his wrists. He submitted without resistance, his dignity intact even in captivity. As they led him toward a waiting horse, he paused beside Olivia. "Remember what I taught you," he said quietly. "You are stronger than you know." Then he was gone, mounted on a spare horse with his hands bound to the saddle horn, surrounded by armed soldiers who regarded him with undisguised contempt. Olivia watched them ride away, a hollow feeling expanding in her chest. Only when they had disappeared from sight did she realize she was trembling. "Good riddance," James said, coming to stand beside her. "Apache's nothing but trouble." She turned on him, fury replacing her shock. "Did you do this? Did you report him to the soldiers?" James took a step back, surprised by her vehemence. "What? No, how could I? I just got back last night." "But you've been in the area. You could have heard about a missing Apache warrior, put it together with what you found here." "Liv, you're not making sense. Why would I?" "Because you came back for money, James. Money that isn't here anymore. And now you need a new plan." A calculating look crossed his face. "Is that what you think of me?" "It's what you've shown me you are." They stood facing each other, the gulf between them wider than it had ever been. In James's eyes, Olivia saw something that frightened her more than his anger, a cold, assessing intelligence that was measuring her worth against his needs. "You care about him," James said finally. "That's savage. You actually care what happens to him." Olivia didn't deny it. "He was kind to me when you weren't." James's jaw tightened. "Well, he's gone now, and you'd best forget him if you know what's good for you." He turned and walked back to the cabin, leaving Olivia alone in the yard. The days that followed were a tense dance of avoidance and necessity. James seemed determined to act as if nothing had changed between them, as if he could simply resume his place as husband and master of the house. Olivia, for her part, went through the motions of being a dutiful wife while her mind worked feverishly on a plan. Akila was at Fort Wilcox, less than a day's ride away. From snippets of conversation she'd overheard when trading in town before James's return, she knew the fort's reputation. The commander, Colonel Barrett, was known for his hatred of the Apache. Prisoners rarely left alive. On the third night after Akila's arrest, Olivia lay awake, listening to James's steady breathing from the bedroll he still used by the fire. She had refused to allow him back into her bed, citing her recent childbirth as the reason. In truth, the thought of his touch now repelled her. Her decision crystallized in the darkness. She would go to the fort. She would speak to Colonel Barrett. She would do whatever it took to secure Akila's release. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. The next morning, James announced he was riding into town. "Need to see a man about a job," he said over breakfast. "Mining company's hiring. Not as good as my gold plan, but it'll do for now." Olivia nodded, careful to keep her expression neutral. "When will you return?" "Tomorrow, likely. Might take some time to arrange things." He eyed her speculatively. "You going to be all right here alone? Those soldiers might come back." "I'll be fine," she assured him. "I managed for 2 months without you." A flash of irritation crossed his face, but he let the barb pass. "There's a shotgun in the corner. Use it if you have to." As soon as James had ridden away, Olivia sprang into action. She changed into her best dress, a navy blue cotton that had once been quite stylish in Boston, and pinned her hair neatly. From beneath a floorboard in the bedroom, she retrieved the money she'd hidden there, nearly $30 that James didn't know existed. The ride to Fort Wilcox was long and uncomfortable. Olivia hadn't been on a horse in months, and the old mare James had left behind was hardly a smooth mount. But determination drove her forward, across the rocky terrain and through the sparse pine forests that separated her cabin from the military outpost. Fort Wilcox came into view in the late afternoon, its high wooden walls stark against the blue sky. As Olivia approached the gates, she rehearsed what she would say, the story she had crafted during the long ride. A guard stopped her at the entrance. "State your business, ma'am." "I'm Mrs. Olivia Mason," she said, summoning every ounce of the proper Boston lady she had once been. "I wish to speak with Colonel Barrett regarding a prisoner brought in 3 days ago, an Apache named Akila." The guard's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes made Olivia's heart sink. "Wait here," he said, turning to speak to another soldier. After a brief conversation, she was escorted into the fort and led to a small office where a harried-looking lieutenant sat behind a desk covered in papers. "Mrs. Mason," he said, rising as she entered. "Lieutenant Wilson. The colonel is currently unavailable, but I understand you're inquiring about the Apache prisoner." "Yes," Olivia said. "There's been a terrible mistake. Akila was working for me, with my husband's knowledge and permission. He's no raider or murderer." Wilson's expression was carefully neutral. "I see, and your husband can confirm this?" "Of course," Olivia lied. "He would have come himself, but he's meeting with the mining company today. Business, you understand." Wilson shuffled some papers on his desk. "Well, Mrs. Mason, I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news. The prisoner you're inquiring about is no longer at Fort Wilcox." A cold dread settled in Olivia's stomach. "What do you mean? Where is he?" Wilson wouldn't meet her eyes. "There was an incident 2 nights ago. The prisoner attacked a guard during a transfer and was shot while attempting to escape." The room seemed to tilt beneath Olivia's feet. "Shot? You mean he's dead?" "Yes. I'm sorry to be the bearer of such news, especially if he was indeed in your employ." Olivia gripped the back of a chair to steady herself, disbelief warring with a crushing sense of loss. "I don't believe you," she said, her voice barely audible. "Akila wouldn't try to escape. He submitted to arrest willingly." Wilson spread his hands. "Savages are unpredictable, Mrs. Mason. It's why they can't be trusted, no matter how civilized they may appear." The casual racism in his tone sparked something in Olivia, a flare of anger that cut through her shock. "I want to see him," she demanded. His body. I want proof." "I'm afraid that's impossible. He's already been buried." Common grave outside the fort walls. Without ceremony, without allowing his people to claim him. The injustice of it burned in her throat. Wilson's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Mrs. Mason, whatever arrangement you had with this Indian is none of my concern. He died attempting to escape lawful custody. That's all there is to it." He stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have duties to attend to." Olivia was escorted from the fort in a daze, her mind refusing to accept what she'd been told. Akila couldn't be dead. Not the man who had moved with such grace and purpose, whose quiet strength had been her anchor in the darkest days of her life. As she mounted her horse for the journey home, something caught her eye. A figure watching from the shadows near the fort's stables. A native woman, her dark eyes meeting Olivia's with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. The woman made a subtle gesture, pointing toward a stand of juniper trees a short distance from the fort. Curious, despite her grief, Olivia directed her horse toward the trees once she was out of sight of the fort. The native woman was waiting for her, mounted on a small pinto pony. "You look for Akila," the woman said, her English halting but clear. Olivia's heart leapt. "Yes. Do you know him?" "I am Nasha, Akila's cousin." The woman studied Olivia with open curiosity. "Why white woman search for Apache warrior?" "He saved my life," Olivia said simply, "and now they say he's dead." Nasha's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in her eyes. "Not dead," she said finally. "Soldiers lie." Hope surged in Olivia's chest. "He's alive." "Where is he?" "Fort prison. Bad place. Deep hole in ground." Nasha made a gesture toward the earth. "They beat him. Ask questions about Chief Naiche's warriors. Camps. Akila tells nothing." Tears of relief and anguish mingled on Olivia's cheeks. "Can we help him? Can we get him out?" Nasha nodded slowly. "My brother Kitchi watches fort, counts soldiers, looks for weakness. When moon is dark, 3 nights from now, we try. I want to help. Olivia said immediately. Nasha studied her for a long moment, as if taking the measure of her soul. Why? He is Apache. You are white woman with husband. Because... Olivia hesitated, then decided on the truth. Because I love him. The simple admission, spoken aloud for the first time, settled in her heart with the weight of undeniable truth. She loved Akila. Perhaps she had since that first night, when he had held her hand through the darkest hours of her life. Nasha seemed to accept this, nodding once. 3 nights, when moon is gone. Come to big rock shaped like sleeping bear, 1 mile west of fort. Bring water, food, medicine if you have. I'll be there, Olivia promised. As Nasha turned her pony to leave, Olivia called after her. Wait, how did you know to find me? How did you know I would come looking for him? The Apache woman looked back, a faint smile touching her lips. Akila spoke of woman with hair like raven's wing and heart like mountain lion. Said you would come. With that, she disappeared into the trees. Olivia returned to the cabin with renewed purpose, her grief replaced by a fierce determination. James had not yet returned, for which she was grateful. It gave her time to think, to plan, to prepare for what was to come. The night of the rescue attempt arrived clear and moonless, the sky a vast field of stars. Olivia had told James she was visiting a sick neighbor, a widow who lived several miles away. He had been suspicious but ultimately unconcerned, too preoccupied with his own plans for getting to the gold fields. The great rock formation Nasha had described was easy to find, its silhouette looming against the star-filled sky like some ancient guardian. As Olivia approached, shadows separated from the darkness, 3 Apache warriors, including Nasha, and a 4th figure she didn't recognize. You came, Nasha said, sounding faintly surprised. I said I would. Olivia dismounted, pulling supplies from her saddlebags, water skins, dried meat, bandages, and the small pot of healing salve Akila had made from desert plants. The largest of the warriors stepped forward, his face painted for battle. I am Kichi, brother of Nasha, cousin to Akila. I'm Olivia Mason, she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. I'm here to help however I can. Kichi studied her, then nodded once. The white woman will stay with Takoda, he said, gesturing to the 4th figure, an elderly man with a deeply lined face. We 3 will enter the fort. No, Olivia objected. I'm coming with you. I know the fort's layout. I've been inside. Kichi started to protest, but Nasha laid a hand on his arm. She has fire, she said in Apache, then switched to English. You have plan? Olivia nodded. I can create a diversion at the main gate. The soldiers know me. They'll be confused, not immediately hostile. While they're dealing with me, you can enter from the back, near the stables. The prison cells are beneath the commander's quarters. A long discussion in Apache followed, during which Olivia stood her ground, meeting Kichi's skeptical gaze without flinching. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. We go together, he conceded. But you obey my words, white woman, or we leave you behind. Understood, Olivia agreed. Their approach to the fort was cautious and slow. Takoda remained with the horses at a safe distance, ready for their escape. When they reached the edge of the cleared area surrounding the fort, Kichi pointed to the main gate, then to Olivia. Now, he whispered, make soldiers look at you. Heart pounding, Olivia emerged from the shadows and approached the fort at a run, her hair deliberately disheveled, her dress torn at the shoulder. A woman in distress. Help, she cried as she neared the gate. Please help me. The guards at the gate raised their rifles, then lowered them as they recognized her. Mrs. Mason, what's happened? Raiders, she gasped, clutching at the gatepost as if exhausted. Apache raiders at my cabin. My husband, he's wounded. Please, I need help. The mention of Apache raiders spurred immediate action. One guard ran to alert his superior while the other helped Olivia inside. From the corner of her eye, she saw shadows moving along the fort's western wall, Kichi and Nasha making their way to the stables. Olivia was led to the same office where she had spoken with Lieutenant Wilson. The lieutenant himself appeared moments later, hastily dressed and clearly annoyed at being roused from sleep. Mrs. Mason, I understand there's been an Apache raid at your property? Yes, she said, feigning distress. 3 warriors. They broke in just after sunset. My husband tried to fight them off, but he was stabbed. I managed to escape while they were ransacking our home. Wilson was already calling for men to be assembled. Did you recognize any of them? Was it Chief Naiche's band? Olivia shook her head. I couldn't see clearly. It was so dark and everything happened so fast. She allowed tears to fill her eyes. Please, my husband needs a doctor. He could be dying. We'll send a detachment immediately, Wilson assured her. And I'll have someone escort you to the infirmary. You can rest there until the men return. Thank you, Olivia murmured, praying that Kitchi and Nasha had found Akila by now. The diversion was working. She could hear the commotion of soldiers preparing to ride, orders being shouted, horses being saddled. A young corporal was assigned to escort her to the infirmary. As they crossed the fort's central yard, a commotion erupted from the direction of the commander's quarters. Shouts, the sound of breaking glass, and then a gunshot. Stay here, the corporal ordered, drawing his pistol and running toward the disturbance. Olivia hesitated only a moment before darting in the opposite direction, toward the stables. As she reached them, 3 figures emerged from the shadows, Kitchi, Nasha, and between them, barely upright, Akila. Even in the darkness, Olivia could see how badly he'd been beaten. His face was swollen, one eye completely closed, and he moved with the stiffness of someone with broken ribs. Akila, she whispered, reaching for him. His good eye widened in recognition. Olivia, no, you shouldn't be here. We must go, Kitchi hissed, already leading them toward the back wall. Now! The fort was in chaos. Most of the soldiers focused on the supposed Apache raid. Still, their escape was far from easy. As they reached the section of wall where Kitchi had left a rope, a shout went up from behind them. Prisoner escaped! The Apache is escaping! Gunfire erupted, bullets splintering the wood near their heads. Kitchi pushed Akila toward the rope, then turned to face the oncoming soldiers, drawing a knife from his belt. Go, he commanded. I will follow. Nasha helped Akila climb, his movements agonizingly slow. Olivia went next, her hands burning on the rough rope. Behind her, she could hear Kitchi engaged in battle, his war cry rising above the shouts of soldiers. As they dropped to the other side of the wall, more shots rang out. Nasha stiffened, a grunt of pain escaping her lips as a bullet found its mark in her shoulder. Nasha! Akila reached for his cousin, but she waved him off. Keep moving, she ordered through gritted teeth. They stumbled toward the trees, where Takoda waited with the horses. Behind them, Kitchi appeared at the top of the wall, silhouetted against the fort's torchlight. He leapt down to join them, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. Quickly, he urged. More soldiers come. Mounting the horses was a challenge with Akila's injuries and Nasha's wounded shoulder, but desperation lent them strength. As they galloped away from Fort Wilcox, the sounds of pursuit faded behind them, the soldiers unwilling to chase Apache warriors into the darkness of their own territory. They rode hard for hours, following trails only the Apache knew, until they reached a hidden canyon deep in the mountains. There, a small encampment waited, several families of Akila's band who had separated from the main tribe for safety. As they dismounted, Akila collapsed, his strength finally giving out. Olivia rushed to his side, cradling his head in her lap. Why, he whispered, looking up at her with his one good eye, why did you come for me? Olivia brushed the hair from his battered face, tears flowing freely now. Because, she said simply, echoing the words he had once spoken to her, no one should face the night of their greatest battle alone. A ghost of a smile touched his swollen lips. Olivia Mason, he murmured, raising a trembling hand to touch her cheek. Woman with the heart of a mountain lion. Then his eyes closed, his body surrendering to exhaustion and pain, but his chest rose and fell steadily under Olivia's watchful gaze, and she knew that whatever came next, their greatest battle was just beginning. Dawn broke over the hidden canyon, painting the rock walls in hues of gold and amber. Olivia had not left Akila's side through the night, helping Takoda, who she learned was the band's medicine man, tend to his injuries. The old man had worked methodically, setting broken bones, applying poultices to cuts and bruises, all while chanting in a low, rhythmic voice that somehow soothed Olivia's frayed nerves. Nasha's wound had been less serious than they had feared. The bullet had passed cleanly through the muscle of her shoulder. Kitchi had emerged largely unscathed from the escape, bearing only superficial cuts and a fierce pride in their success. As the encampment stirred to life around her, Olivia became increasingly aware of the curious glances directed her way. She was, after all, a white woman, among the very people her kind had been systematically displacing and destroying. Yet there was no hostility in the looks she received, only a wary curiosity. Akila woke mid-morning, his good eye fluttering open to find Olivia still beside him. For a moment, confusion clouded his face, then recognition, and finally a warmth that made her heart skip. "You are still here," he murmured, his voice rough with thirst and pain. Olivia helped him drink from a water skin. "Where else would I be?" A shadow crossed his face. "With your husband." The word hung between them, a stark reminder of the complications that awaited beyond this temporary sanctuary. "James isn't my husband," Olivia said firmly. "Not in any way that matters." Akila studied her face. "The white man's law says different." Before she could respond, Nasha approached, her wounded arm in a sling, but her movements otherwise unimpeded. "Cousin," she greeted Akila, kneeling beside him, "your spirit is strong. The soldiers did not break you." "Thanks to you," he replied, "and to Kitchi and—" His gaze returned to Olivia. Nasha followed his look, her expression softening slightly. "The white woman has courage and loyalty." It was as close to approval as Olivia was likely to get. Throughout the day, members of the small band came to see Akila, to touch his hand or speak soft words in Apache. Olivia learned that they were waiting for word from Chief Naiche, who was leading the main body of the tribe deeper into the mountains, away from the increasingly aggressive military patrols. As sunset approached, Kitchi called a council. Though still weak, Akila insisted on attending, leaning heavily on Olivia as they made their way to the central fire. The band gathered in a circle, some 20 men, women, and children in all. Olivia was acutely aware of being the only non-Apache present, but Akila's hand in hers gave her the courage to hold her head high. Kitchi spoke first, recounting the rescue and honoring both Nasha's bravery and Olivia's assistance. Then an older woman, Kitchi's mother, Olivia gathered, raised a question that sent a ripple of tension through the circle. "What of the white soldiers? They will hunt us now, knowing we have taken their prisoner." Kitchi nodded grimly. "We must join Chief Naiche. There is safety in numbers." "And what of her?" another warrior asked, gesturing toward Olivia. "The white woman. She cannot come with us to the sacred lands." All eyes turned to Olivia, and she felt Akila's hand tighten around hers. "She risked everything to help me," he said, his voice gaining strength. "She is welcome among my family." The older woman who had spoken first shook her head. "Your heart speaks, Akila, not your mind. She is white. Her kind has brought nothing but death to our people." "Not her," Akila insisted. "Olivia Mason is different." "And her husband?" Kitchi asked quietly. "What of him? Will he not bring soldiers to our door seeking his woman?" Olivia felt the weight of their stares, the reasonable fear behind their questions. These people had been betrayed too many times to trust easily, especially a woman whose very appearance marked her as the enemy. "I will not endanger your people," she said, her voice clear in the firelit circle. "James Mason is not a concern. He doesn't know where I am, and I doubt he will search for me with any real determination. His interests lie elsewhere." She took a breath, then continued, "But I understand your caution. If my presence brings risk, I will leave at first light." "No." Akila's response was immediate and forceful. He struggled to his feet, swaying slightly but refusing Olivia's support. "I will not lose her again." The simple declaration sent a flush of warmth through Olivia's chest. But before she could respond, Takoda, who had been silent until now, raised his hand. "I have seen a vision," the old medicine man announced, his voice surprisingly strong. "Two eagles flying together, one white, one dark. They soar above the mountains, away from the smoke of war, toward the setting sun." He fixed his rheumy eyes on Akila and Olivia. "The spirits have shown me this path. It is not with the tribe and it is not with the white man's world. It is a new path, one that few have walked." A murmur ran through the circle as the Apache digested the medicine man's words. Olivia didn't fully understand their significance, but she could see the impact they had on the others, particularly on Kitchi, whose skeptical expression had given way to thoughtful consideration. "What are you saying, old one?" he asked. Dakota gestured toward the west. Beyond the great desert, beyond the mountains that touch the sky, there is a place where the land meets the endless water, a place where a few of our people have found refuge among tribes who remember the old ways. This is where the eagles must fly. California, Olivia breathed, understanding dawning. He's talking about California. Akila looked at her, then back at Dakota. That journey, it is long and dangerous, especially for one who is injured. More dangerous to stay, Dakota countered. The soldiers will not rest until they have recaptured you, Akila, and they will show no mercy a second time. The truth of his words hung heavy in the air. Fort Wilcox would be in an uproar after the escape, the soldiers more determined than ever to track down the Apache who had humiliated them, along with the white woman who had helped him. "What of my duty to our people?" Akila asked, addressing Kitchi directly. "I am a warrior of the Chiricahua. I cannot abandon our fight." Kitchi was silent for a long moment, then stood to face his cousin. "Our fight is for survival, Akila. Each of us must find the path that keeps our spirit alive." He placed a hand on Akila's shoulder. "Your path lies with her now. The medicine man has seen it." The council continued late into the night, plans made and provisions allocated. By the time Olivia and Akila returned to their shelter, a decision had been reached. They would leave at dawn, traveling west with supplies provided by the band, aiming for the coastal tribes of California, where other Apache refugees had found sanctuary. "Are you certain of this?" Olivia asked as they sat beside the small fire outside their shelter. "Leaving your people, your homeland, it's a terrible sacrifice." Akila gazed into the flames. "My people are scattered, Olivia. Our homeland shrinks each season, as the white man pushes us into smaller and smaller spaces. Soon there will be nowhere left." He looked up at her, his swollen face solemn in the firelight. "But with you, I have found something I thought was lost forever." "What's that?" she asked softly. "Hope," he said simply. "You gave me back hope." Olivia felt tears well in her eyes. "And you gave me back my life." She reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. "When James left, I thought I was alone in the world. I was so afraid." "You are not alone now," Akila said, "and you need never fear again." "I wish you had never saved me," she whispered suddenly, echoing the words from her darkest thoughts during those first days after losing her son. Akila stiffened, his expression clouding. "Because," Olivia continued, her voice strengthening, "if you hadn't, I would never have known what it means to truly love someone, and that would have been a far greater loss than death." Understanding dawned in Akila's eyes, and he reached for her, drawing her gently into his arms despite his injuries. "Olivia Mason," he murmured against her hair. "Woman with hair, like the raven's wing and heart like the mountain lion." She leaned back to look into his face, seeing beyond the bruises and swelling to the man she had come to love. "Akila," she replied, "man who walks between worlds and carries light in the darkness." Their lips met in a kiss that held all the promise of the journey ahead, difficult, uncertain, but faced together. As dawn broke over the hidden canyon, a small party gathered at its entrance, Akila and Olivia mounted on sturdy ponies, their few possessions packed in leather bags. Kitchi, Nasha, and Dakota had come to bid them farewell, along with several other members of the band. "The spirits will watch over you," Dakota assured them, pressing a small medicine pouch into Akila's hand. Nasha approached Olivia, her expression solemn. "Take care of my cousin," she said. "His heart is strong, but it has known much pain." "I will," Olivia promised, "and I'll keep him safe." A ghost of a smile touched Nasha's lips. "I believe you will, white woman. You have proven your worth." Kitchi was the last to speak, clasping Akila's arm in a warrior's grip. "Until we meet in the spirit world, cousin." "May it be a long time from now," Akila replied, his voice thick with emotion. With final farewells exchanged, they turned their ponies westward, toward the vast expanse of desert and mountain that separated them from their destination. The journey would be arduous, the future uncertain, but as Olivia rode beside Akila, their shadows merging in the early morning light, she felt a peace she had never known before. "I love you," she said, the words coming easily now, as natural as breath. Akila turned to her, the rising sun illuminating his face, still bruised but healing, just as their hearts were healing. "And I love you, Olivia Mason, in this life and the next." Together they rode toward the horizon, two eagles soaring free, one white, one dark, just as Takoda had foreseen. Behind them lay the past with all its pain and loss. Before them stretched a future of their own making, where love had transcended the boundaries of race and circumstance to forge a bond stronger than all the forces that had tried to keep them apart. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting their elongated shadows across the vast landscape of the American frontier, Akila and Olivia rode on, carrying with them the hope of a new beginning. 5 years later, the Pacific stretched endlessly before them, waves lapping gently against the shore as the setting sun painted the water in shades of gold and crimson. Olivia stood at the edge of the small wooden porch, watching as Akila taught their 4-year-old son, William, to string a fishing net. Their home was modest, a sturdy cabin nestled in a sheltered cove along the California coast, surrounded by towering redwoods and lush vegetation that bore little resemblance to the harsh desert they had left behind. Nearby, a small settlement of Miwok natives had welcomed the strange couple, the Apache warrior and his white wife, with a generosity that still humbled Olivia. The journey west had been as difficult as they'd anticipated. Winter had caught them in the Sierra Nevada, forcing them to shelter with a family of Paiute who had been skeptical but ultimately hospitable. Spring had brought renewed strength to Akila's injured body and a renewed determination to reach their destination. By summer they had found this place, this perfect convergence of forest and ocean, far enough from white settlements to avoid unwanted attention, yet close enough to trade when necessary. The coastal tribes, less directly impacted by the wars raging further east, had been cautiously accepting, especially after Akila demonstrated his willingness to learn their ways and respect their traditions. Life here wasn't easy, but it was theirs. They hunted, fished, grew vegetables in a small garden, and occasionally traded with passing ships. Olivia had put her education to use, teaching reading to the children of both native and mixed families who lived along the coast. And then there was William, named for the son Olivia had lost, but a child so vibrantly alive that the name had taken on new meaning. Born 3 years ago with his father's copper skin and his mother's green eyes, he was a perfect blend of them both, a living symbol of the bridge they had built between two worlds. "Mama," William called now, breaking into her thoughts. "Look what Papa taught me." Olivia smiled as her son proudly held up the small section of net he had managed to knot. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Soon you'll be catching fish all by yourself." Akila approached, resting his hand on William's head. He has quick fingers, like his mother. The years had been kind to Akila, though a few new scars marked his body, testament to their difficult journey and the challenges of carving out a life in this new place. His face had regained its handsome planes, and his eyes held a peace that had been absent when they first met. "Letter came today," he said, nodding toward the small table inside where a folded piece of paper lay. "From Boston." Olivia's heart quickened. 3 years ago she had taken the risk of writing to her parents, unsure if they were even still alive. The reply had come 6 months later, tentative, full of questions, but ultimately accepting. They had never approved of James, they wrote, and had feared the worst when his letters stopped coming. To learn that their daughter was alive, even if living an unconventional life far away, had been enough. "Good news?" Akila asked, watching her expression. Olivia nodded. "They're well. Father's health is improved and—" She paused, a smile spreading across her face. "They're coming to visit, next spring." Akila's eyebrows rose. "Your parents, here. Is that all right?" Uncertainty crept into her voice. "I know it's unexpected." He considered for a moment, then smiled. Family should be together. William should know his grandparents. The simple acceptance, the generosity of spirit that had drawn her to him from the beginning, filled Olivia with warmth. "I love you," she said, reaching for his hand. "And I love you, Olivia," he replied, the formal use of her full name long abandoned. "More with each sunrise." William tugged at his father's sleeve. "Papa, tell the story again, about how you saved Mama." It was William's favorite bedtime story, though they had softened the harsher elements for his young ears. Someday, when he was older, they would tell him the full truth about the prejudice they had faced, the dangers they had overcome, the sacrifices made for love. Akila lifted his son into his arms. "Which part do you want to hear? The part where your mother saved me or the part where we saved each other? Both, William declared. Olivia laughed, joining her family on the porch as the sun dipped lower toward the horizon. It's the same story, little one. It always has been. As twilight settled over their coastal haven, Akila began the tale that had become their family legend, of a warrior who heard a cry in the wilderness, of a woman who found strength she didn't know she possessed, of a journey across mountains and deserts to a place where they could simply be who they were, two people who had defied a world intent on keeping them apart. Later, with William tucked into bed and the sound of the ocean providing a gentle lullaby, Akila and Olivia stood on the porch beneath a canopy of stars. His arms encircled her waist as she leaned back against his chest, their bodies fitting together as perfectly as they had from the first time they'd embraced. "Do you ever regret it?" Olivia asked softly. "Leaving your people, your homeland?" Akila was quiet for a moment, his breath warm against her hair. "My people are scattered now," he finally said. "Some on reservations, some still fighting, some fled to Mexico. The homeland I knew is changed." His arms tightened around her. "But here, with you and William, I have found a new homeland, one that cannot be taken away." Olivia turned in his embrace, looking up into the face of the man who had transformed her life. The years had etched fine lines around his eyes, but they were laugh lines now, not the marks of hardship they had once been. "Remember what I said that night in the canyon?" she asked. "I wish you had never saved me." A shadow crossed his face at the memory, and I knew then it was time. "Time for what?" she asked, curious about the meaning he had taken from her words all those years ago. "Time to stop pretending that what was between us was merely gratitude or convenience," he said. "Time to acknowledge that two people from different worlds could find in each other something worth fighting for." Olivia reached up to touch his cheek. "And has it been worth it? All the struggles, all the danger?" Akila captured her hand, turning it to press a kiss into her palm. "Every moment," he assured her, "every breath." As if in answer, a shooting star streaked across the night sky, its brief, brilliant passage a reminder of the beauty that comes from daring to burn brightly against the darkness. Olivia made a silent wish, not for herself, but for all those who, like them, found themselves caught between worlds, seeking a path to call their own. In the distance, a coyote called, its lonely cry echoing off the cliffs. But here, on this small porch overlooking the endless ocean, there was no loneliness, only the quiet certainty of two hearts that had found their way home. "Come," Akila said, taking her hand. "Tomorrow we fish with William, then prepare for your parents' visit. Tonight," his dark eyes held a familiar warmth, "tonight is for us." Together they walked into the cabin, closing the door on the vast, star-filled sky. Outside, the waves continued their eternal rhythm against the shore, a constant reminder of the forces that shaped the land, just as love had shaped their lives, gradually, persistently, and with a power that could overcome any obstacle. And if the spirits of the ancient land took notice of this small family, this improbable union of cultures and hearts that defied the divisions of their time, perhaps they smiled, seeing in them the promise of a future where the borders between peoples might someday dissolve, replaced by the simple recognition of our shared humanity. For Akila and Olivia had discovered what few in their turbulent era had dared to imagine, that love, when genuine and brave, could transcend the artificial boundaries of race and circumstance, creating something new and beautiful in a world desperate for healing. Their story would be told and retold, growing with each generation, a testament to the power of two people who chose love over fear, compassion over prejudice, and the unknown path over the safety of the familiar. And in choosing that path, they had found not just each other but themselves. The end. Dear listeners, there's a magic in the stillness just after a story ends, that sacred space where the characters still live in our minds, teaching us lessons we didn't know we needed. As Akila and Olivia's tale settles into your soul tonight, I want to share something rarely spoken about the beauty of your season of life. They say youth is wasted on the young, but what they don't tell you is that the afternoon and evening of life holds treasures morning could never imagine. Like a desert sunset that outshines the dawn, your present moment carries colors and depths impossible in earlier years. Remember when Akila told Olivia, "What I want has not mattered for a long time. Perhaps you've felt this way, overlooked in a world obsessed with youth and novelty. But here's the truth many miss. Your desires, dreams, and voice matter more now, not less. You've earned the right to speak with the authority that only comes from having weathered storms and celebrated countless dawns. Notice how Akila and Olivia found freedom, not in clinging to the familiar, but in venturing toward the unknown horizon. This is the hidden superpower of your generation, the courage to reimagine what the next chapter might hold when others assume your story is already written. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, try something different. Rather than reviewing the day's concerns, place one hand over your heart and whisper, "I am exactly where I need to be." Feel the steady rhythm beneath your palm, the same faithful beat that has carried you through every triumph and heartbreak of your remarkable journey. Did you know that scientists have discovered trees communicate through an underground network, sharing nutrients and warnings of danger? The oldest trees, the elders of the forest, serve as the central hubs of this wisdom network. Like those ancient trees, you are not merely surviving. You are a vital connector of community wisdom, an essential guardian of insights that would otherwise be lost. As the evening blanket of stars embraces our planet, know that you are held just as tenderly by forces seen and unseen. The very air around you carries memories of your laughter, your tears, your quiet acts of kindness that rippled outward in ways you may never fully know. Tomorrow, when you open your eyes to a new day, remember that, like Olivia, finding unexpected love in the wilderness, life still holds magnificent surprises perfectly tailored for you. Age has not diminished your capacity for wonder. It has deepened it, like a well that reaches purer waters the deeper it goes. Sleep deeply tonight, precious friend. The universe stands guard over your dreams, and morning waits patiently to greet you with possibilities as vast as the western skies that witnessed Akila and Olivia's journey home. You are not merely surviving the passing years, you are illuminating them with a light that grows ever more radiant, ever more essential to our shared human tapestry, until our next story carries you to yet another landscape of the heart. Wild West Whispers team, thank you so much for staying with us until the end of this powerful journey. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support truly means the world to us and helps us feel encouraged and inspired to keep creating more stories filled with love, redemption, and emotional twists that resonate deeply. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for being part of our storytelling family. And don't go just yet. Another emotional story from our channel is waiting for you at the end of this video. Click and be surprised by more unforgettable moments. With all our gratitude, the Wild West Whispers team.